Welcome to the Things That Bother Me. This channel is about calling out the things we're told not to question. Power, systems, and the stories used to justify them. Today's topic is the baby boomers, not the myths, not the nostalgia. The reality of how one generation gained unprecedented economic and political power and held on to it. This isn't about blame, it's about consequences. Let's get into it. The generation that took everything and called it normal. The baby boomers did not just inherit a strong America. They inherited the most favorable starting position any generation has ever received, and then engineered the system to ensure they would remain on top for the rest of their lives. They were not the builders of the post-war order. They were the beneficiaries who learned how to monetize it. They did not create the safety net. They used it, then dismantled it. They did not merely influence policy. They occupied every lever of power simultaneously. Political, economic, cultural, and institutional, longer than any generation before or after them. This is not a story about hard work versus laziness. It is a story about timing, scale, and capture. Because power is not about how loudly you rebel in your youth. Power is about what you do once you're in charge, and how long you refuse to let go. By that measure, the baby boomers are not just powerful. They are unprecedented. Section 1. Born into the greatest economic sweet spot in history, boomers were born into a world already stabilized and expanding. The U.S. was the dominant global industrial power. Infrastructure was new, funded, and expanding. College was affordable and often subsidized. Housing was cheap relative to wages. Unions were strong. Pensions were standard. Healthcare costs were manageable. Upward mobility was real and common. They did not have to rebuild after catastrophe. They did not have to compete globally for survival-level jobs. They entered adulthood during the longest, widest on-ramp to prosperity in American history. That all matters. A lot. Section 2. From counterculture to total institutional control, boomers like to remember themselves as rebels. That phase was brief. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, boomers moved en masse into corporate leadership, financial institutions, law firms, media conglomerates, universities, federal and state governments. And once they arrived, something changed. They never left. Retirement ages rose, leadership turnover slowed, boards recycled internally, political incumbency hardened, judicial appointments skewed older and stayed longer. No generation before them held this many institutions for this long at this scale. This is where power stopped rotating. Section 3. The great economic reversal they benefited from and locked in. Boomers presided over and profited from a fundamental shift in the American economy, wages disconnected from productivity, deregulation of finance, union power weakened, defined benefit pensions eliminated, risk transferred from institutions to individuals, housing turned into a speculative asset, education financialized, healthcare commodified. Here is the key point that often gets dodged. Boomers already owned assets when these changes occurred. So when stocks surged, they held them. Housing prices exploded, they owned homes. Tuition rose, they were already educated. Pensions vanished, they were grandfathered in. This was not accidental. It was structurally advantageous timing, followed by policy choices that ensured the advantage compounded. Section 4. Narrative power, how boomers justified the outcome. Power is safest when it sounds like morality. Boomers framed the new reality as personal responsibility. Free markets, meritocracy, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. The implication was clear. If you struggled, it was your fault. Structural barriers were dismissed. Debt was normalized. Instability was reframed as character building. This narrative allowed boomers to accumulate wealth without guilt, dismiss younger generations' data-backed grievances, retain moral authority while holding disproportionate power. They didn't just win economically, they won the story. Section 5. Political dominance without precedent. For decades, boomers voted at higher rates, donated more money, ran more campaigns, occupied more leadership roles. They shaped tax policy, housing policy, education funding, labor law, healthcare structure. And even now, well past traditional retirement age, they continue to dominate Congress, the courts, corporate boards, media ownership. No generation in U.S. history has held political power so late into life at such scale for so long. Section 6. The generational aftermath. What followed was predictable. Millennials entered adulthood during two economic collapses. Gen X was squeezed between stagnating wages and rising costs. Gen Z inherited debt, instability, and eroded institutions. Each generation became more educated, more productive, more technologically capable, yet less economically secure. This is not coincidence. It is the downstream effect of prolonged generational capture. In closing, power that refused to move on. The baby boomers will be remembered as the generation that had every advantage and treated it as proof of superiority rather than circumstance. They were not villains, they were rational actors in a system that rewarded self-preservation. But history is not interested in intentions, it is interested in outcomes, and the outcome is this. A nation where wealth, power, and security pooled upward and backward, away from the future. Power is supposed to circulate. When it doesn't, legitimacy collapses. The defining question of the coming decades will not be whether the boomers were good or bad. It will be whether America can recover from a generational imbalance, this extreme without breaking apart. Because no generation before them took so much control, and no generation after them has yet figured out how to take it back. Thank you for joining me once again. If this hit a nerve, hit like. If you've got something to add, comment below. And if these are the kinds of conversations you think we need more of, subscribe below. This is the things that bother me. Until next time.